Hi guys, so I tried a different position here. I'm actually in my spare bedroom and you can see I've got quite a nice view. I haven't actually done any recording this week, mainly because every time I go out I like to do the walk and talks around Cairns, but to be quite frank, it's been like a wind tunnel here for the last few days, and so the audio is totally stuffed every time I walk outside. It's just phenomenal. I don't experience this when I go overseas. I didn't have that much wind to encounter in Seville or Saigon. But Cairns is one of the windiest cities I've ever encountered, so it's a real challenge to find a day where it's fairly still. I actually shot some background footage around the marina on Wednesday, and it was blowing a gale. I mean, I had to actually hold the tripod down to make sure it didn't shift or wobble, taking shots of the water and what have you. So it's just ridiculous. And I've got to say, I'm quite concerned about the way Australia's going at the moment. I think we are very poorly governed, and I do fear for our future. I mean, it may sound a bit melodramatic, but I really do feel that way. I do worry about the future of this country. I think bad decisions are being made in Canberra all the time. A succession of bad decisions that are really going to affect our living standards. And it does concern me. I think that Scott Morrison is turning out to be a disastrous Prime Minister. You know, after he won that election early this year, the unwinnable election, he had an amazing mandate. He had the possibility of doing so many things. He had new people he could appoint into cabinet. He had a clean slate, and he just seems to have totally blown it. And now the Morrison government has an entrenched reputation as being a do-nothing government. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. This is one of the fundamental problems with our politics today, that the Greens have such an influence in virtually every area of government these days, indirectly through the bureaucracy, I believe, is where this is all happening, because a lazy government like the Morrison government, who don't have a vision, who aren't prepared to make tough decisions, will just listen to the bureaucrats in Canberra, from the senior public servants onwards. They will not make a decision themselves. They are always listening to these other people, and it's the lazy and easy way to govern. But it is not going to work in the long term, because the Australian electorate are getting fed up with this type of lazy government. We want people with a vision who are going to provide us with reasonable priced electricity, which is something that is just not happening. And these wasteful decisions in government, like the Defence Ministry, with this submarine contract, which I think is in the order of about $50 billion or something. I mean, $1 billion to them is nothing in the context of defence. They just throw away money. It's a sinkhole for money, and poor bastards that have been working their guts out, paying taxes, their money is just basically pissed against the wall with these ridiculous decisions. And this is Canberra, because it's not the real world. These are bureaucrats making these ridiculous decisions. This one was actually partially a political decision, or maybe not just partially, to keep Christopher Pyne in his seat. Now, Christopher Pyne has resigned, so there's no imperative there now anyway. So I just don't understand it. It boggles the mind how these people can waste so much money. And one issue that really is annoying me is the Snowy 2.0 scheme, which is to pump water up into the reservoirs in the Snowy Mountains, which costs a damn fortune to release it when the electricity prices are high, so you can actually fill peak demand. But it's one of the most expensive ways of providing electricity. And that seems to be the way that the Morrison government thinks. The cheapest and most economical way of providing electricity is still through coal power stations. Now, it won't be forever. We are going through a transition stage, but right now, until we get storage capacity through efficient batteries, we cannot use renewable resources effectively 24 hours a day. We need base load power. We have two alternatives to provide that. One is nuclear, but because the Greens have basically have strangled the bureaucracies in every state and have now infiltrated the Liberal Party and the National Party by the looks of things as well. Nothing can be done. Nothing. You can't even say the word nuclear. I think it's actually finally changing to a certain extent, but for years, for decades, nuclear has just been taboo in Australia. It's just absurd. So, of course, we're driving industry out of this country because the costs of energy is so high, whether it be electricity, gas, whatever. Whereas in America, someone like Trump, who's a rational human being, he's actually reducing the cost of energy over in the States. And I think they pay around 12 cents per kilowatt hour, and we're paying around 29 cents per kilowatt hour. I mean, how can you possibly compete? Yet we are probably the most resource-rich country in the world, but we're not using our resources in an efficient way. The green infiltration into the major parties is now so great that they're afraid that these pressure groups will be offended if they do anything that's perceived to be anti-green, which is basically means that everybody has to pay more for basics. Because if once you increase the cost of energy, you increase the cost of transportation as well. So it affects every sector of the economy. So it's just, like I said, that's why I'm so depressed about the future of this country, because it is so poorly managed. And then I haven't even got on to the rural sector. Is it any wonder that Scott Morrison's approval is starting to plummet? It is going to hit the basement if he doesn't change. And he's such a stubborn, arrogant person. I doubt whether he ever will change. The Liberals and the Nationals voted against providing a guaranteed price for milk so that our dairy farmers wouldn't keep going out of business. We're losing all our dairy farms. If we're not selling them to the Chinese, they're just packing up and leaving. And now we've got the drought. It makes it even worse. But of course, there's no national emergency plan to help out the drought-stricken farmers. Morrison doesn't seem to give a crap about farmers. He's supposedly a Christian. I love these people who are these supposed devout Christians, but they don't act like it. They don't show any of that compassion that is supposed to be part of that religion. It just makes me sick. The hypocrisy from politicians is unbelievable. The guy who actually put my insulation in, he actually also, his family has a farm out the west, a few hundred kilometres west of here. And he said, yeah, it's horrible. We are really suffering. But of course, they don't care in Canberra. They don't give a stuff. They live in a bubble. And as long as their salaries keep getting paid, I'm all right, Jack, seems to be their attitude. Well, I say stuff them. And I say people in Australia should really start thinking about voting for other parties rather than the big three, which is Labor, Liberal and Greens. Just think about alternatives, for God's sake. Make these people... This is what happened in California, though. When you keep voting for the same turkeys, this is why places like California are in such an absolute mess, because the Democrats have a supermajority over there. So nothing ever gets done. They are great on the rhetoric of helping out the poor and dispossessed, but the truth of the matter is that they have one of the greatest income disparities in the world in California. So you've got the super mega rich, and you've got a greater proportion of poverty in that state than anywhere else in the States. Now, this is the sort of thing that could happen in Australia if we don't get the policies right, because if you keep making basics like power and food unaffordable, because this drought, we're not going to help these farmers. They're going to lose their breeding stock. There's going to be no future. The only reason that Morrison's in power is because Labor was so unelectable. It's not really a positive for Morrison. It's more people were so scared of the alternative. That's why Morrison got in. But of course now he's got a saviour complex. He obviously thinks he can walk on water. So it's really dangerous situation we have here. And unless something is done, like I said, there should be some sort of an emergency a national emergency called about the drought, and they should have the army in sending food for the stock and everything to interstate to where it's needed. But of course, he's not lifting a finger. Morrison does not give a stuff. He's more interested in travelling around the world. I'd love to see how many kilometres he's already clocked up on seeing international hosts over. He has been travelling for about 50% of the time since he's actually won the last election, from my reckoning. It may be a bit of an exaggeration, but he seems to be out of the country as much as he's in the country. And, you know, I just, like I said, he has been a major disappointment. I was suspect about him from the beginning. Then I actually was prepared to give him a go after the election. I thought that was great because we did dodge a bullet. But now he is just as bad as ever. And the ultimate test of that is he's got an endorsement from Malcolm Turnbull on his policies. So I think you couldn't get much more damning assessment than that. So, look, I'm sorry, but I can't see things changing under his leadership. I think it's unlikely the Liberals will mount a challenge after all the instability that's taken place in the party. I can't see a way out of this. I think we're stuck with this turkey, and under his leadership, or lack of leadership, nothing's going to change, and it's really sad. So, yeah, unfortunately, I'm very pessimistic. So I wish I could be more upbeat, but not at this stage. The only thing I can hope for is that the Australian electorate wakes up and votes for an alternative. But we're still going to have to wait 2.5 years to make a decision. Please consider subscribing to my channel if you think there's anything there of use to you, or entertainment or whatever. And either do that or give me a thumbs up, or if you're feeling really energetic, do both. That'd be great. But please don't ignore me. That's the worst thing you can do on YouTube, is be ignored.